Hello, everyone, and welcome to the course of world history. I am Mr. Samuelson, and today is all about the arms race and the space race in our continuing exploration of the Cold War. Our essential question is, what was the impact of American and Soviet competition on science? So, let's start with the race for the scientists themselves. As Nazis gained power in Germany, they targeted foreign and Jewish intellectuals. That is, they went after smart people who weren't ethnic Germans. So those smart people, a lot of them, being smart, fled the country. They got out of there. And many were welcomed with open arms by the United States and by the Soviet Union. They were attracting these scientists in order to give them a home and benefit from their intelligence. What a smart move. Albert Einstein, this fella here with the lovely hair, was just one of Germany's top minds that escaped Germany in these early Nazi years. So, Nazi physicists and engineers, it goes beyond the foreign and Jewish intellectuals, because despite losing many top scientists, Germany does retain and train a lot more. They do build a scientific core to push the Nazi war machine. Nazi leaders had a great interest in using science because scientists can make some really good weapons. By good, I mean bad, you know what I mean. But they are experts at doing this and using scientific knowledge to build some of the biggest, baddest, and best bombs. After the war, the Nazi scientists, that's a lot of knowledge. And if you're staring down a potential Cold War, possibly World War III, you want to have the best scientists in the world on your side. So even though they were Nazis, we're going to borrow them and use their brains. And so both the US and the Soviet government kind of brushes their Nazi past under a rug and says, hey, come work with us. In the United States, this is known as Operation Paperclip. It's a secret program that brought over a lot of Nazi scientists and kind of ignored their past and put them into positions of power within the US government. With them, they brought a lot of knowledge for advancements in rocketry. The V2 rocket winds up being a model for a lot of the rockets that the United States makes. Jet engines, because the Nazis had a program to build better fighter aircraft using jet engines, brought that knowledge over. Particle physics, which is going to be important for expanding nuclear warfare. All of those scientists joined the US and Soviet Union. So, into the competition itself. Near the end of World War II, Western eyes were already on this future conflict with the USSR. Kind of had the feeling that it might be coming. In fact, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, was even noted as saying that he did not believe that the war should end with the capture of Berlin, that the war should end with the capture of Moscow, that the Allies should take the fall of Nazi Germany just as one step and then push to declare war on the Soviet Union and roll back communism as well. Now, the other Allied powers did not bite on this. In fact, Great Britain did not bite on this either. Everybody is tired of war. They want to return to peace. And so there was no outright war with the Soviet Union. The use, however, of the 2 atomic bombs in Japan, they didn't just end World War II. And there's some speculation to suggest that they weren't just intended to end World War II and knock Japan out. That part of the reason for using these bombs, instead of just showing the Japanese that we have them on less significant targets, was to signal to the Soviets that we have them and we're not afraid to use them when people are at war with us. So don't think about expanding. Don't think about challenging Western Europe. If you do, it's going to be a war and we'll use these on you too. So that is a theory. All right, nuclear espionage. The USSR, Soviet Union, began working on atomic weapons as early as 1939. So before the United States had used our first one, the Soviets were working on it because they had learned that the United States were working on some sort of super weapon, and they'd pieced together what this was. Now, this program rapidly accelerates after the US drops 2 bombs, and the Soviet Union realizes, oh my gosh, they have it. we have to catch up. If we don't have one of these, they could attack us. We could fall victim to the West again. So the Soviets round up their captured Nazi scientists, force them to join Soviet scientists that are already working on this, and combine their efforts. In addition to that, there are spy rings in the United States, groups of people in the US. These 6 right here were pretty effective at this time, that infiltrated the US scientific communities and were able to extract plans on the US atomic weapons and transfer those to the Soviet Union. This is a big part of why the Soviet Union was able to acquire a bomb as quickly as they did. These 2 fellows right here, the Rosenbaum's couple, Julius and Ethel, they were captured. They were executed for treason, whereas the others were not captured. By 1949, the USSR did have an atomic bomb, so it took them only 4 years after the US dropped one. And then we up the game, the hydrogen bomb. If you think an atom bomb is bad, if you think Hiroshima got a bad deal, the hydrogen bomb would be so much worse. The development of the Soviet hydrogen bomb levels the playing field even more and kicks off more research into bigger bombs. The Soviet bomb, hydrogen bomb, US gets that one first. 1952, the US blows up the first hydrogen bomb. It's about 450 times as powerful as the Nagasaki bomb. So you're talking big enough to erase, and they did do this, erased islands from the map. They would test this bomb on a small island. The bomb would go off. The island does not exist anymore. That's how powerful these hydrogen bombs are. In 1955, Soviet Union, thanks to their own science and espionage, are able to match this accomplishment and turn around in just 3 years what the US had accomplished with the hydrogen bomb. The problem with these bombs is that they are massive. Look at this thing right here. That is a really big bomb. It's not easy to transport a bomb that is this large, filled with, material that is very heavy. Uranium, plutonium, these are heavy, heavy elements. This thing weighs just a ton. So both nations then realize that they need to miniaturize these, make them smaller in order to deliver them more effectively. That's where rockets come in. Smaller nuclear weapons could be placed on rockets and delivered faster and from farther away, and really, shoot them across the world, the intercontinental ballistic missiles. In a nuclear war, speed, surprise, and total destruction are essential. Right? You need to completely knock out your enemy before they can launch their own rockets back at you. Because if your rockets are still in the air when they launch their rockets, then you're both dead. So you need something super fast to get over there in order to deter this type of strike. The most advanced rocket technology at this time in the world comes from Germany. As I've mentioned before, Hitler and the Nazis had heavily invested in the V-2 rocket. They had fired several of these off in World War II. The only nation to have a well-developed rocket missile program in World War II was Germany. So all those scientists became really appealing to both the Soviets and the United States. So, space race. Soviet Union gets a head start in the space race. Rocket technology used, taken from Nazi scientists, are able to send people and objects up into the Earth's orbit for the first time. 1957, the Soviet Union, USSR, shocks the world by putting the world's first satellite, Sputnik, this guy right here, into space. Sputnik was a very simple machine, but effective, and could transmit a signal from space back down to the Soviet Union. They follow this up a few years later with a manned mission to space. This crazy brave person, Yuri Gagarin, launched up in a rickety, I'm not going to call it a rocket, I'm going to call it a missile, up into space, orbits the planet, and then crash lands back down with parachute system and whatnot. But talk about brave, man, Yuri Gagarin. But winds up being the very first man in space. So the U.S. is far behind, and they do not want to be behind. US President Kennedy responds to this with one of his most famous speeches, where in 1962, he called to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, or as he said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." That Kennedy accent. So that was Kennedy making this challenge. Now, at the time, we had not taken any significant steps toward doing this. US scientists did not know how to accomplish this goal of putting a person on the moon. It was a huge endeavor, but it becomes something of a scientific and cultural obsession. If we're going to compete in the space race and win, we got to do this, so let's go do it. And the United States really does respond. It could also be used as propaganda, right? We wanted to show that we had regained the scientific lead on the Soviet Union, that kind of national pride, that American democracy and capitalism can triumph over communist Russia. So Apollo 11 and the moon landing. July 20th, 1969, we made it. A couple months to spare. 2 American astronauts do walk on the moon. There are conspiracy theories around this. Do not listen to conspiracy theories. Astronauts walked on the moon. Neil Armstrong was the first. He was the commander of this mission. And he gives a memorable quote that this was one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The idea that mankind had now left the planet and landed on other orbital bodies. With the moon landing, the U.S. does reclaim the lead in the space race, and as of this recording right now, the U.S. is the only nation to ever put a man on the moon. No other nation has yet done it as of 2020. Other nations do have a plan. China has a plan to do this at some point in the future. So the cost of competition. The space race and the arms race are insanely expensive. And both nations dedicate a huge portion of their government spending toward winning these competitions. The US, though, had a stronger economy to start with. We also produced more consumer goods, so directing money toward the space race took less out of the hands of the American public. American public could still get a toaster while the United States built rockets. This just wasn't true in the Soviet Union. The people in the Soviet Union are being deprived so that their economy, which was weaker because of the devastation of World War II, could focus more on weapons and space. So Soviet spending on space and on the military means the Soviet people are not very happy. They're pretty angry. They see how other people around the world are living, and they're supposed to be in this great nation, the Soviet Union. How come we're living with electricity only working for part of the day? How come we can't get working appliances in our house? How come all these things are available widely, but not for us if we're supposed to be so great? So it really does set the stages for the collapse of the Soviet Union. That's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you next time.